Wonderful. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. This is this week we're learning Parshas Vayera. Vayera, the God appeared. God appeared to Abraham, and after he made the circumcision, and 3 days after he made the circumcision, and announced to him that he was going to give birth to a child, and his wife, he said, she's going to give birth to a child. That's how this worked. Of course, God appears to Abraham, and we'll see that angels appear to him. We'll see. Okay, now in this week's Torah portion is also the very strange, bizarre, and sordid story of Sodom and Amorah. Sodom and Amorah. It's, for some reason in English they call it Gomorrah. I don't know why, but they could let them do whatever they want. But it's called Sodom and Amorah. And Sodom and Amorah it was really a complex of like 5 big cities that basically the cities that Abraham saved last week when he made that big war that we skipped over. We learned about that in the afternoon. We skipped. So Sodom and Amorah, God decides he's going to destroy the place. He's going to destroy them. They're terrible sinners, terrible sadistic people. And God says, I'm going to go and, but how does God say? God says, I'm going to go down and see if the screams that come out, what exactly is going on. People are screaming out for help to be saved from these evil people from Sodom and Amorah, what they were doing to people, how they were torturing them. So they were stretching them and cutting them, terrible sadistic things. They really got a pleasure out of doing this. And God said, I'm going to go down and I'm going to see. Eradav says, I'll go down and I'll see. So the question is, what does he have to go down for? I mean, God's everywhere, isn't he? God is everywhere. God is everything. Nothing is outside of God. God is creating everything. So here we have the big secret. And the big secret, this is what all the Kabbalistic books talk about. And usually, like last year, we learned that we've been doing this for 2-3 years already. So we learned this, but I skipped this part last year because it's sort of Kabbalistic. It's difficult to understand the terms a little bit and to put them in proper perspective. But this year, I think we'll do it. Let's see how it goes. Okay, the idea behind this is like this: that God, whatever reason he decided to do it, but that's the way he did it. We're looking, it's like human anatomy, right? You look at a book of the human anatomy, you think, why is a human being like this? Why does he have to have 2 eyes on the top? And why can't people have eyes like chameleons and hearts like lions, or just be made, of steel, just last a long time. They could fix each other up. Some people could fix each other, you last a long time. But God didn't decide to do that. Whatever reasons God decided, he decided to make the world in this very natural, complicated, seemingly arbitrary way, to the point that there's very genius scientists and philosophers and things, and they say that world just evolved. It just sort of developed on its own. It's sort of, how do you say it? Just somewhere or other started. Who knows where it started? We'll find that out. But it's just sort of, opened up on its own, and it sort of generated and regenerated and things like that. And they bring all sorts of, proofs in their minds. On the other hand, you can't prove that God exists. It should be the most obvious thing in the world. If God is really creating us, then there should be some evidence of this, right? We're saying that God creates us all the time, constantly. Me, you, everything in the world, all the stars, all the animals, all the atoms, all consciousness, all being, and even more, the God of the Jews, he cares. He cares what we do, right? He rewards, he punishes, he's involved, he helps. He's a melech, ozer, Moshiach. Again, we say it in our prayers all the time. So there's nothing except for him. Nothing except God must be everywhere. On the other hand, if God really, there's nothing except for him, so what does he care? Let him make a world and let it do whatever he wants. What does he care what people do to each other? Right? It's their problem. It's not his problem. Right? They want to destroy each other, so they'll destroy each other. Maybe there's no such thing as good or bad. I mean, that's pretty much prevalent, nowadays. The abortions are no problem. You can't killing the old, euthanasia. The Germans, they were big geniuses, a lot of them, the greatest in philosophy and science and this. And by them, killing was no problem whatsoever. It was no problem. Or maybe it was a problem how to do it. The most efficient way. To this day, they say it's a not understood miracles, big debates. How is it that they didn't get the atom bomb? The Germans, if they had the atom bomb, they would use it in a second. They would be very happy. That would be a big holiday by then. Right, as it is, they killed like 50 million people without killing. What's the problem? The Japanese in World War II killing people. It's absolutely, communists killed more than both of them put together, I think. Right, killing people, no problem. Anyways, what's life? What's death? So really, who says that there's such a thing as God? Who says? And if there is, why did he hide himself like that? Why is he so concealed? You have to believe in him and existing. You see the evil people succeed, and the righteous people they fail. The church is multi-trillions of dollars, and the Chabad houses are just scraping to get by. How does that work? How does it work that way? How does it work? So the answer is that it's a very complicated answer. Very complicated answer. And in some ways, the answer is maybe even more complicated than the question is. So the answer deals with these ideas in Kabala, Kabbalistic ideas. That's why in the writings of Chabad, there's so much dealing with Kabbalah, to let you know that there are all these, complications and levels and spiritual, steps and the dimensions and facets and things like that. And it's all just part of the creation. It's just a part of the creation. That's not the creator. It's not the creator. This is part of the creation, the God's light, God's word, God's power, God's creative force, aspects of God, levels of God, but it's not God. Not Hashem. Hashem himself, that's the Hashem that cares. Hashem himself is the one that cares. That he comes down through all these levels and all of this, and he cares about me and you and everybody. Right? He cares about us. That's what we Jews believe. That's the essence of God. The essence of God, somehow or other, is attached to man. Man, that's the message of the Jews. That God cares about the world. He's creating everybody, but he cares and he helps and he protects. But the world is not what we think it is. And it doesn't go the way we think. But God is good and he always does the best for us, even though we don't see it. How do you say God gives us always what we need, not what we want? Okay, so let's get back to this now. So the point of this whole business, we're going to go into it now. The point of it is to recognize that God does exist, despite the fact that he's totally hidden. And we're going to see from this that he's infinitely more hidden than you can possibly imagine. Some people think that all the religions, they see the spiritual worlds and they say, we found God. It's not so. We're going to see in a moment. All the spiritual worlds are just creations of God. You want to call it aspects of God. But it's not. Here Judaism deals with God himself. And we're saying that God himself personally is interested in every single human being in the world. He's interested in the whole world, but especially human beings, and especially the Jews. But the fact that he's interested in the Jews does not anyway minimize his care for all humanity. According to Judaism, every human being in the world is infinitely more precious to God than all of their other religions. You can't find any religion in the world that maximizes the importance of every human being in every single moment of life like Judaism. For the non-Jews, I'm talking about. For the non-Jews, for the Gentiles. Right? According to Judaism, God automatically loves his whole creation. And the whole creation is good. It says in the beginning of the creation, Yar Elohim, Tov Meod, God made everything was good. And every man is created in the image of God. But this is concealed, and we've got to do a lot of work in order to reveal it. And there definitely is reward and punishment, although in Hasidic works, it goes into that very, very little. Very, very little. And I mean, if you want to talk about reward and punishment, like we've said so many times, it could be that a person was bad his whole life, terrible. And he did one good deed, and that puts him up into heaven. And it could be the person was just a righteous, holy person his whole life, and he does one bad deed, and it could put him into hell. So nobody knows. How could one good deed put this guy into hell? And I've done 1,000 good deeds. Why? I did one good deed, I'm sorry, puts the person into heaven. And I've done 1,000 good deeds. Why doesn't that put me into heaven? Why? I don't understand. No, God knows what he's doing. Right? God knows what he's doing. So what's the answer? What's the answer? The answer is just to try to do good. That's all. If you did bad, ask God for forgiveness and say you're not going to do it again. Okay, that's here we see an incorrigible situation. God said he's not going to destroy the world again, but Sodom and Amorah, they just went overboard. They went overboard. It was impossible to fix them up. And God said, I'm going to come down and I'm going to fix them. What does he have to come down for? So here we go. Now there's a book which is, hello? There's a book which is called the Zohar. This book, which is called the Zohar, was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai about something like 1,800 years ago, 1,900 years ago. And this book was, it was written by Shimon Bar Yochai. And in this book, it explains a lot of these upper worlds. A lot of these upper worlds. What's going on in these upper worlds? How Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai knew this, I have absolutely no idea. But he was a holy person. He was a Jew, and he had a soul. And his soul was very, very, how do you say, very, very sensitive and true to these things. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he was considered by all the other wise men of the generation. And all these people in the generation of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they had the ability to raise the dead. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he was like the second generation, I think, third generation of the Tanaim. And they had the power to raise the dead. It says even the last of the generations, they had the power. So these people were tremendously holy people. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he was holier than all of them. Everybody venerated Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And he wrote a book called the Zohar. And there, in the beginning, the introduction of the Zohar is something that we say every Shabbat. A lot of Jews say it. I think especially the Sephardic Jews and the Hasidic Jews. I don't know. I know Chabad says it in any case. What does it say? It says, Patach Eliyahu, that Elijah the prophet, he comes down and speaks to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Patach Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet, he opened up, he began. And they say what this means is that he opened up a channel that now everybody can understand this. Before it wasn't understandable. These were secrets that were not accessible to normal human beings. We're talking about the truth over here. We're not talking about just sitting in, imagining science fiction or Jewish fiction or whatever you want to call it, Kabala fiction, right? A person gets a little bit of inspiration, so he makes up all these ideas. We're talking about the truth, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And the reason for all of this, again, is to recognize God. It's not to impress your friends, and to show how much Kabbalah I know and sit and, put a veil over your head and speak quietly, so no, put a picture on YouTube or something. Here we're talking about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was revealing the truth, was revealing what the truth is. Patach Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet, began and he said, Antu chad b'lo b'chushman. God, you are one. B'lo b'chushman, but you cannot be counted. It's not a numerical one. God is one, but there's no number two. There's no number two. What does it mean? It means that God, you are one existence and there is no other existence. Nothing else exists except for you. Chad, v'lo b'chushban, but it can't be reckoned. Your number is not a numerical value. You can't take another God and add up to this God, so it comes out two gods. Right? There's nothing, you can't say that there's God and that there's also the world. There's also spirit. There's also angels. There's also, no. God, you are number one, and it cannot be reckoned at all. Okay, which seemingly there can't be any statement which is less true than that. What do you mean? Here, there's me, there's you, there's the world. What do you mean? All there is God. What does that mean? Obviously, there's a world. Who is this being written to? There's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He exists. Who's he writing a book to if nothing else exists except for God? So we're going to see in a minute. Antu the apikas, you are the one that emanates. Te'eser tikunim, 10 tikunim, 10, in this case it's the sfirot, 10 aspects. Okay, Lahavin, let's understand. Lama Nikra et Yud Sfirot. Why are the 10 Sfirot of God called Tikkunim? Why are they called Tikkunim? Tikkunim, we're going to see it means like jewelry, like a precious jewel or something. People put it on to enhance their presence. Enhance their presence. Women put on jewelry, makes them look good. Right? It makes them look good. And that's a good thing. Right? Women are supposed to look good, especially to their husbands. They're supposed to look good. And so they put on jewelry, makes them feel good. Tikkunim. Right? Sometimes you might wonder, what's the business? This whole tremendous market, multi-trillion dollars of jewelry. Men like jewelry also. I don't know. I never was a big fan of it, of jewelry, and Hasidim, they don't wear any jewelry. There's no, there's not a thing. But women wear jewelry, and it's a very nice thing, that they have jewelry, if they have money. Their jewelry, I don't know if they wear jewelry in California or something because they get stolen, but the jewelry is a thing that people wear, right? Well, jewelry, it makes you look good. It makes you look good even more. Jewelry is tremendously valuable. It's more valuable than clothes, more valuable. Jewelry. It's something that's very close to a person. A person has jewelry. A jewel makes them close. So we'll see this. Okay, again, this is the 10 Sfirot. Again, I just want to keep stressing this. I think it's very important. Keep stressing it. The point of learning all this is to try to realize that this is all a creation of God, and that God himself is the one we're praying to. And God himself is the one who gave the Torah, took the Jews out of Egypt. And God himself is the one that's creating us. Me and you and every human being in the world. And God himself is the one that Moshiach will reveal in the world, the creator. Everyone will bow down to the creator. People won't bow down to people anymore. They won't bow down. The creator, that everyone will feel that they're being created. But meanwhile, the Rebbe is discussing how God hides himself. Now, these levels that he's talking about, these are levels of reality, and they're more real than we are. These are levels of reality that are more real than we are. Therefore, it's called the ladder of prayer. The ladder of prayer. By understanding these different levels, when we pray, so we start to think about them. We think about them, we realize that they're right here. We just don't see them. We don't feel it. Higher levels or dimensions, whatever we call, of reality, something that's more real. When we feel this more reality, then we start to appreciate God more. Wow, God creates this, but this is not God. These levels are not God. This is godliness, aspects of God. Here it's called the 10 Sfirot. God's 10 aspects. God created man in his image. So God, so to speak, has an image. What is this image of God? Well, we know God doesn't have an image, but that's forbidden to say that God has an image. But here it says that God does have an image. And it says that God created us in his image. So what is this image? This is what's called the 10 aspects of God, or in the language of Kabbalah, 10 Sfirot. I guess maybe in English, you can say the 10 spheres. Spheres. They're facets of God's personality. God's his power, his kindness, his beauty. We'll see. And first of all, we have to precede what is the soul. Man is made in God's image. So let's look at the soul. What is the soul? By understanding a little bit about the soul, we can understand a little bit about what God is, because God fills the world like the soul fills the body, something like that. That's another aspect of God, in addition to the fact that God is creating us, but God also enlivens us. So let's understand the soul. The soul enlivens. The soul itself, or pashut, is a simple light. Belis chalkos, without any division whatsoever. Seichel midos, intellect, emotions, with no personality. The soul in its essence has no personality. Right here we see, right, Grandpa, he's 120 years old. He's laying on his deathbed, and they come out and say, "Okay, let's prepare the funeral." So, but he's not dead yet. So, listen, he can't speak. He's got no personality. He can't this. That's it. Let's just, let's bury him. That's it. You can't do that. He's still alive. What do you mean he's alive? He still has a soul. But what do you mean the soul? It's not functioning at all. He hasn't got any intellect. He hasn't got it, but he's alive. And God forbid to kill a person like that, at least the way it is now in America. I think now they're changing the law. But to kill, it's forbidden. You can't kill a person like. And not allowed to kill him. So that's the soul. The soul itself hasn't got any personality. It's stripped of its intellect, seichel, and its emotions. Seichel v'amidos, the intellect and the emotions are bechinas levushim. They're just garments for the soul. The soul has intellect and emotions. But is not the essence of the soul. Right? I think, I know, I feel. What is that I? What is that I? What's the I there? God forbid a person that doesn't see and doesn't hear, there's still an I, there's still a person there. So if so, these 10 aspects of the soul, although they're connected, how do you say, intrinsically wound into the soul, but that's not the soul. They're aspects of the soul. That's what it says in the Tanya, Nefesh Atzmo, that the soul itself, in the second of the third chapter of the Tanya, that the soul itself is divided into intellect and emotions. She'em Nikran, that they are called Atzmus and Nefesh. They're called the essence of the soul. One second, I'm going to make this bigger over here. We're going to make it bigger. Forgot about that. Why not? That what it says in the Tanya, the book of the Tanya. Tanya is also a book written by the first Rebbe of Chabad, right? He wrote it before he wrote these books. That what it says in the Tanya, that the soul itself is divided into, say, intellect, that the intellect and the emotions, they're called the essence of the soul, says, well, I mean, he's right, but it depends what you're comparing it to. It's the essence regarding thought, speech, and action. Thought, speech, and action, they are just separate garments from the soul, really separate from the soul. She'em bechinas, that's like the level of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Okay, these are 3 new terms, which I'm going to explain to you in a moment. She'al zeh, that on this it says, Levushim Tikinas Lon, on this it says that there are garments, the Inun, that they are Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Now, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, these are 3 worlds. This is really the idea of dimensions. Each one of these dimensions of godliness, is also divided into 10 aspects. Everything in the world is divided into these 10 aspects. But there are 4 dimensions of godliness, 4 dimensions. What's called Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. It's also hinted at by the 4 letters of God's name. Yud, that corresponds to Atzilut. Hey, first Hey, that's Bria. Vav, that's Yetzira. And the last Hey, that's this physical world, if you want to call it. This physical world is also divided into spiritual and physical. That's the world of Asiya. That's these 4 aspects. Generally speaking, the world of Atzilut, that's pure godliness. Bria is the world of the souls. Yetzira is the world of the angels. And Asiya is the world of the physical world. Like I said, there's also a spiritual Asiya, but let's just deal with it simply. So these are 4 aspects. Okay, so we see already the world is starting to get pretty complicated, right? This creation. So let's before we look at the world, let's just look at the soul. The soul expresses itself through thought, speech, and action. That's the expressions or the garments of the soul. Then there's what, so to speak, the soul itself. The soul itself, that's the emotions and the intellect. That's the person's personality. But the fact is it's not so. The person's personality, that's just an inner garment of the soul. It's not the soul itself. Like we say, a person that's knocked out, he's still the person. The soul is still there. So this aval seichel and midos, the intellect and the emotions, even though that they are also garments, but they're not separate garments from the soul. But they are like vessels of Atzilut. That's the world of Atzilut. In Atzilut, it says that God, V'gramoy, and his bodies, his vessels are one. I told you this is a little bit complicated. I hope we won't get. Let's try not to give up. Look, and therefore, Nikro B'Shem Atzmius, they are called the name of God's essence. In the Tanya, he says the intellect and the emotions, that's the essence of the soul. It's called by the name, but it's not really the essence of the soul. It's the essence of the soul in regard to thought, speech, and action. That's the 4th chapter of the Tanya. It talks about thought, speech, and action. Ella, but they're called tikkunim. But these aspects of the soul, the 10 aspects of the soul, intellect and emotions, they're called tikkunim. They are like jewelry. That the soul is fixed up and clothed in them. Targum Onkelos, like Targum Onkelos says, Lo yilbash gever simlas isha, and the sentence that it says a man should not put on garments of a woman. He says the word garments is yitaken. That's also the word garment. You yitaken gaver betikune atta. It's Aramaic. So we see that the word garment is the same thing as tikkun, to be fixed. The Indian tikkun, this idea of the tikkun of the jewelry, this is like a takshit, this is like a jewel. Shemit kashetbo, that a person is, the most outstanding example, of course, is a king. A king puts on a crown. His crown is made of gold. It's got all sorts of jewelries on it, gems and things like that. Right? They have there's in display, I think, the crown jewelry of the czar or something like that. It's worth like $100 million. Who knows what? So it's the diamonds and rubies and things. When the king puts on this crown, then he's a king. A king without a crown, he's not a king. Right? He's wandering around in the streets. You see that guy over there? That's the king. Well, where's his crown? A king has the crown. What is the crown? It's just a bunch of stones. A bunch of stones and minerals, right? Gold and silver and diamonds and rubies. A bunch of stones. So the king is a human being. Right? How can a king? It says because when the king puts on the crown is one, the crown jewels, and that's worth more than, right, almost as much as the king himself. When a person puts on jewelry, he unifies with this garment. It's like his part of his body. Just like the soul with the body. That even though that the body is just a garment for the soul. The soul, right? You stub your toe, who feels it? Your toe doesn't feel it. You feel it. Right? It hurt. When a person stubs his toe, the soul feels it. Became Masha'ola, right? That was a big discovery in the medicine, that you could do the anesthetic, and that you could kill the nerves of a certain place, and it wouldn't feel anything. Why? Because the body doesn't feel. It's the soul that feels. That's what we call baratzon. Whatever, for instance, another example, whatever the soul wants, the soul is affected by the body, and the body is affected by the soul. So the Rebbe is just giving us an example of a garment. The body is certainly not the soul. It's not the soul, right? It is, but on the other hand, the body is connected totally to the soul, right? You can't say, I didn't kill that person, I just chopped his head off. It's just his head, it's not him. That's ridiculous. The body and the soul are united one. Something like that is how the 10 sfirot are united with godliness. As soon as for instance, we're dealing with the soul and the body. Just like the soul is affected by the body is affected by the soul. And the soul, as soon as it raises up in the will of the soul to move the body, is immediately the body listens to it immediately. When it raises up in his mind to do this thing, your foot to walk and etc. Without any delay, of spreading out from the brain to the foot. Right? You see piano players, pianists and things like that, they play tremendously fast, faster than you could possibly think. Right? It's automatic by them. The music and this is just automatically moves their limbs. So we see that immediately it moves. Because if there was some delay, Oh yeah, the shiui. If there was a delay, zman ma hari eno shoa afilu rega. Right. I'm sorry. If the soul and the body were something separate, then there would be some sort of a delay. And there is, people that have brain damage or whatever, until they want they move their arms, they have to think about it and concentrate on it, then they can move them. But the fact of the matter is, as soon as it raises up in the mind to do something, as it can be, she'enu shoah, that it doesn't delay even one instant. Elamiyad, immediately, she'ola baratzono, etc. Because the body is united with the soul, but not that the body is the soul. And the soul affects it. As though the body and the soul were one unit. Even though this body is a garment for the soul.
I knew it. Down and didn't look like you were asleep.
One second. Got to turn some things off over here. Give me a minute. Give me 1 minute. I have to make some tikkunim over participants. Participants. Here we go. I have to mute this. There we go. Okay. Nothing personal. Just muting you. Okay. There we go. But why is it that the body immediately reacts to the soul as soon as it comes up? Because the body is united with the soul. Ke'ilu, as though the body was part of the soul itself, even though that the body, in fact, is just a garment to the soul. Nevertheless, it's united. Similarly, as also, we're talking about God. Now let's go with God. Also, the inyan of the seichel and the midos of the nefesh. No, we haven't talking about God yet. No, we're going. Also, the same thing is the intellect and the emotions of the soul, that they are also called tikkunim, and they are just garments, so to speak, of the essence of the soul, right? Just like the body is united with the soul, the body is united. As soon as the soul wants it, the body is united. Well, there's also another similarly relationship, but let's go a little bit deeper. The soul itself, what we think is the soul, our intellect, our personality, our emotions, is that the soul? Is that really us? No, it's not. That's also a garment, but it's united with the essence of the soul. The soul, essence of the soul itself, doesn't have any personality. The essence of the soul has no intellect and has no emotions. The soul, essence of the soul itself, is the soul, just the same way as our body is not our soul. Let's go a more external level. Our body is united with our soul, right? When somebody comes in the room, we say, "Oh, that's Joe," right? But the fact is not Joe. It's just Joe's body. You could even make a robot that looks exactly like Joe. You say, "No, it's not Joe." Nowadays they have these robots that they make from. They know how to contour the faces, and they make of things that looks like a human being, right? But it's not really a human being at all. It says, so therefore the body looks and is united with the soul, but it's not really. Says the Rebbe, the same thing, a little bit deeper level. The personality, your personality is united with the essence of your soul, but it's really not the essence of the soul. From this, we're going to get to God. We're going to see, because we're made in God's image. That the soul is enclosed in your emotions and in your intellect. And they are also vessels for the soul. So the body is a vessel for, you want to call it your soul, the emotions and intellect of the soul, the body, and it's unified. But the emotions and the intellect themselves are also only garments for the inner soul that's attached to it, the true soul. All you're done by means of this, the soul, by means of your intellect and your emotions, your soul does things just like, so to speak, like a hatchet in the hands of the wood chopper, right? The wood chopper can't chop trees unless he's got a hatchet. He has to have a hatchet. Doesn't have a hatchet, he's not a wood chopper. But he has to have it. But the fact of the matter is, he's a wood chopper without they just can't do anything without the hatchet. The same thing is the soul without the body. The soul without the body can't do anything, right? That's the external soul. The inner soul has to have emotions and intellect. That's also the garments. Without the emotions and intellect, your inner soul, your true self, can't do anything. The inner soul, that's the one that Ohev, that loves with the aspect of love, laskil, to have wisdom, with wisdom, Shekol said that all this is only the effects of the soul, v'tzpashtusa, and the spreading out. She'eno ela mimenu ulezazaso. It's only from the person outward, but the soul itself is above intellect and it is above emotions. That was the big sin of the Germans. Now it's spreading out in America also, right? The Germans, they said a person is his personality. As soon as a person gets old, as he has no more use, his muscles don't work, so that's it. You throw him in the garbage. It's not nice to throw him in the garbage while he's still alive. So you kill him first, and then you throw him in the garbage. But that's not so. The essence of the person is not his personality, it's not his intellect, and it's not his emotions. The intellect, the emotions are garments, either united with the soul, but they're only garments. The same way as the body is a garment for the outer soul. But the intellect and emotions, they can change. The emotions, they can be bigger or smaller. A person can be more mature. A child loves stupid things, little things, right? Things that have no value. Older people can have greater values for truth, for honesty, for integrity. They're willing to give up things. But the intellect calls them mazkinim. The intellect, all the time that a person becomes older, gets more experience, etc., he gets wiser. If he uses his time properly, if his whole life he just drank beer, so it's probably not going to have too many experiences to learn from. But usually older people are wiser people. This is not relevant. The nefesh, in the essence of the soul, the essence of the soul never changes, right? Never changes. Once a group of college students, the Jewish college students, they were taken into the Rebbe in the 50s when the Rebbe just began. So they used to bring groups of college students into the Rebbe. And they asked them questions. These people knew absolutely nothing about Judaism whatsoever. And they asked, does Judaism believe in life after death? So the Rebbe answered that Judaism doesn't really believe in death, just different forms of life. There's the soul when it's in the body and the soul when it's outside of the body. But the soul never changes. The Eino Mekabelas Shinuim, it doesn't receive any changes from the body. That the essence of the soul does not really enclose in the body. Sometimes you can say that, that maybe an example of this is in a way like conscience, right? Conscience. A person is all of a sudden his conscience says, listen, I'm not doing the right thing. This is wrong. Well, yeah, like they say that in America, there's a joke. Honesty is the best policy sometimes. But if the situation that you're in, if that changes your principles, then you haven't got much principles, right? That's the big problem with politicians. Politicians, they make all sorts of promises. They really intend to keep them. But all of a sudden they get into a situation, so they change. They become a little bit dishonest, a little bit this. They receive shinuyim mitzad haguf. Only the powers of the body, the powers of the soul, they are affected by the body. Hamakabel bekatan came begadol, so that the child is as a different intellect. He's less mature. His personality is not developed. An older person, his personality, his intellect, his emotions are more developed. Does that mean that the intellect and the emotions are really the person? No. The intellect and the emotions are tied to the person. They are attached to the person. But the fact of the matter is, because they change, that's a sign that's not the essence of the person. The essence of a human being never changes. The Gamma Sechavamidos, also the intellect and the emotions, they are only ha'oros and nefesh. They're just rays of the soul. The kochotel and its powers, mispashtet beguf, that spread out in the body. The ein and atzmius and nefesh is not the essence of the soul. Okay, so we see that the soul does, so to speak, produce intellect and emotions, but in fact, the soul itself is not intellect and emotions. We're going to say it's the same thing with God. Also above, but we're not going to get to that. But the soul is affected by in its powers in these rays, etc. But nevertheless, einon levushin nifradim. They are not these garments of the soul, intellect, and emotion. They are only garments of the soul, but they're not separate garments, like thought, speech, and action are. Shema oros kochos amalabishim mamish as anavers. These are powers. These are really just only garments of the soul. A person can change his thought. He can change his emotions. Change, I'm sorry, his words, right, etc. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. But the intellect and emotions of a person, they are raised from the essence of the soul. They are not the essence of the soul, but they are the rays of the essence of the soul. First, a person could say something, he'll say, listen, you didn't understand me. I didn't really mean what I said. Those are the ways the word came out. I just put the comma in the wrong place, right? I didn't really mean the words. But if you hate somebody, you show them hatred, right? It's not a mistake. You can say, listen, it's true, I really hate you, but somebody told me, how do you say, they convinced me, right? I was given false information. Well, that's okay. What about intellect? But still, nevertheless, that's the person himself. The person himself hates. The person himself loves. The person himself this, right? Is that really the person himself? So the Rebbe says, well, apparently yes, but in fact not. There's a deeper level to the soul than the person's emotions and the person's intellect. These, your intellect and your emotions, they're not really garments. They're like tikkunim. They're like, how do you say, jewelry. They're connected to the essence of the soul. And the soul is, how do you say, beautified by them. Just like a person puts on a woman puts on a beautiful bracelet or something. This makes the person more beautiful, more attractive. Okay, all of this we're talking about the soul. So here we have three levels, if we want to call it, of the person. The essence of the soul, which never changes. The aspects of the soul, your personality, which does change, but it's connected to the essence of your soul. It's your emotions, your intellect, but it's not really you. And then we have thought, speech, and action. That's really separate, right? Sometimes a person can say things, etc., that he doesn't mean to do. Similarly, also by God, there's what's called the 10 sfirot of God that are called tikkunim. And now we're going to get into the intellect, to talk about God. And we're going to try to answer a question about why God said I have to come down into Sodom and Gomorrah to see what's going on. What does it mean to come down? We'll see. So we talked briefly about God, that there's these four dimensions. Atzilut, that's the world of pure godliness. Bria, that's the world of the souls. Yetzirah, of the angels. Asiya, that's the world of action, this physical world. That when we're talking about these aspects of God, God's intellect, the 10 sfirot of God, God's intellect, God's emotions, and that's how God is in the world of Atzilut. Hainu Chochma and Midot of Atzilut, the highest of the four dimensions of godliness. The Iyuv Gramoyechad, that there it says that God and all of his vessels and his sfirot and everything are all one. But Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, they're just like garments. Like you take off your shoes, take off your shirt. They're garments. And on them it says, Levushim Tikinaslan. And on them it says that garments have been fixed. That's garments. That's the Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, that's called garments. So there's what we call the oneness of God. Then we have the sfirot of God. That's the 10 aspect. And then we have what's called the garments of God. As we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. I hope this is not too difficult or too, what do you say, abstract for everyone. Because we're talking about abstract things, we're talking about God. But the point of Chassidut is to make God not abstract. Exactly the opposite. To realize that this world, this is the world that's the abstract. The true reality is God. The true reality is that there's a creator and he's creating everything. We just don't feel it. That's how far away we are. But that's the true reality. That's essentially what Moshiach is going to bring, that the whole world will be filled with knowledge of God, awareness of the creator. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Now let's learn the Devar Malchut. Second, I got to turn this thing off. share. Stop.